What's going on, everybody, and welcome into another edition of the Monday Night Football preview show here on the FanDuel channel. I'm your host, Ryan Williams. You can find me on Twitter at RyanAlexander_W, and I'm joined, as usual, by the Jim Sonis, the great Jim Sonis, Mr. Jim Sonis himself. You can find him on Twitter at Jim Sonis. And Jim, as we get into this Monday Night Football preview show, we got to do what we always do and reflect back on the Week 7 main slate. Which was very disappointing, was it not?
Yeah, for me at least. Hopefully it was good for some people. And I guess it has to be because somebody won money this week. It wasn't me, but I hope it was someone out there doing well. It was not me because I decided to load all up on Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill stacks. I did have AJ Brown quite a bit, but it doesn't matter when it's tied to duds. So I feel like the good decisions I made, which were few and far between, were canceled out by the bad decisions. So that was my week. How was yours?
Yeah, that was mine as well too. I had a ton of Tyreek Hill. He was one of my DFS studs on the FanDuel YouTube channel that I was talking about this week, and just love to get exposure to that game through him, but him alone, which I guess kind of helped in some ways. I got on some Joe Burrow stacks late, which saved me. Matthew Stafford, Tom Brady stacks saved me. So I'm usually one to play like 4 quarterbacks, and so I just so happened to get on some of the lineups. But yeah, my main lineup had Tom Brady, had Mike Evans, had Chris Godwin. So that was nice. I did get off of the Tampa Bay D late, and I had $100 paid up for Carolina D on the road. That was not fun.
That's not a bad process play, though.
No, I felt like it was good. I do usually try and stay away from road favorite defenses, especially when they're popular. And Carolina was gaining some steam there, and I'm always been targeting the Giants so far this season. So I felt like that was pretty solid. I thought that the Tampa Bay game wouldn't be as awry as it was, and it was. So there we go. So yeah, always fun. If you guys if you guys ever want to reflect on your weekly DFS process, you guys got to check out the Heat Check Pod powered by Number Fire, Jim Sonis, Brandon Gadula. These guys are awesome at just breaking that down. It's one of the things that I love going to, if not to just make me feel better about my weeks as well too, when sometimes the guys are suffering just like me. But no, they go through in depth of the main slate and preview the next slate. So always fun. Had to give a shout out there.
I hope the reassuring thing too is that when we get bad advice on Thursdays, it hurts us too. That's what I hope is reassuring. Is oh, okay, so maybe I shouldn't have recommended, Patrick Mahomes last week. And you can at least get some Schadenfreude. I've listened to the Monday show and saying, oh wow, yeah, Jim didn't do well this week. So at least that cancels out the bad calls I make Thursday, hopefully.
Absolutely. There's always something that you can derive from, positive or negative. And it's not, I hate to be negative. It's all learning, right, Jim? We always learn, and we have 18 weeks this year to do so. Yeah. So we're getting ready to wrap up week 7, going into week 8. Plenty of time for us to win money, plenty of time for you guys to win money. And that's why we talk the Monday Night Football preview, because there is still a slate left for us to go back and win some money here. We're going to talk about the FanDuel single game slate. We're going to talk about the FanDuel sports book, as we always do. And I see some guys coming into the chat. Shout out to Marvin Haywood, who's joining us from Facebook. He had a good day stacking Tennessee up, so we love that. And appreciate everybody who's getting in their questions about the game tonight. We will get into the game, and I think it starts, Jim, with depicting what's going to happen in Seattle. It's back-to-back nights that we're going to be dealing with weather in the primetime game. We had that happen last night in Santa Clara with San Francisco, an Indy game that being a torrential downpour, and I really love targeting the running backs there. But Seattle looks like the same way here with the weather. I think they have current temperature, I'm not sure what it is, but I know that they were projecting for high winds in this game. I know there had been some power outages throughout the week there. So what are you seeing from the weather in this game, and what is that leading you to target in this game as we talk about the single game slate?
It looks like it'll be a bit less severe than it was last night, in the sense that maybe we won't have 16 fumbles or whatever it was. So I think that basically you would take last night's game and then scale it down a pretty decent amount. It'll still be windy. So for me, the cutoff in general, where I get to really worry about wind and downgrade passing games, is 15 miles per hour. That's where winds are projected at right now, with gusts being higher than that. So to me, that says, okay, take passing games and reduce them 10%. That's kind of like the baseline number if you look back at past data, quarterbacks in wind speeds of 15 plus miles per hour tend to underperform their projections by about 10%. So go over here to the number 5 projections page. You see Jameis at 15.7, decrease that about 10%. It's not a huge deviation or anything, but I think that to me, it solidifies that I probably just want to go Alvin Kamara at MVP and just find ways to differentiate. Like, I know everyone else will go there too, but like, it's so hard to find a different way to go there outside of Kamara. So I think it just kind of solidifies him as being the MVP pick for me.
Yeah, and it for cash games especially too, Jim. I think that if you're looking at just playing one player from this game, that you can say, hey, who's going to have not only a usable score but a winnable score that I would want at the MVP slot. I think you have to look at Alvin Kamara and just start there. I mean, we have injuries on the Seattle side. Actually, some people coming back in the backfield with Rashad Penny being activated, it looks like, and he could be set to play in his first stint. Alex Collins was banged up all through the week, but he's going to be good to go. And then they got the guy Travis Homer there. So I think that I was looking at the ground games for both of these sides to be potential MVP spots, just because the way Geno has struggled. And I see Joe Russo also joining us from FanDuel asking about the Geno breakout game. And it is interesting to me because you cannot run against the Saints. I mean, the numbers have been just disgusting for running backs against the Saints. I think only Antonio Gibson, Christian McCaffrey, and Saquon Barkley have had over 50 rushing yards against this team. Nobody's had 100. But Alex Collins has looked great getting this role here from Chris Carson. And you know what? I think that they're going to want to keep the ball out of Geno's hands. I'm not expecting a Geno breakout game for me personally, but I think there are ways that you can get action on the Seattle pass catching side. Jim, how are you viewing Seattle as a whole tonight?
Yeah, I think the good thing is we probably know where the ball is going with Geno. It seems like it's going to be concentrated between DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. Even in the start last week for Geno Smith, we pull up the target numbers over here from last week. It was 7 targets apiece for Metcalf and 7 for Lockett, and then nobody else had more than 5. DJ Dallas probably going to get squeezed out there. So maybe some of those go to Rashad Penny, maybe some go to Alex Collins and stuff like that. But I feel like, to me, you can still feel good about those guys because, like you said, it is really tough to run the Saints. That's a very difficult situation, and the script is probably going to set up more towards passing. Obviously, the weather is like, it is what it is, but like, I still feel like you can feel decently okay with those guys and go towards them. If you want to save some salary, I think that Gerald Everett's probably the optimal way. He is, I think, $6,000 for tonight, $5,500 somewhere in there. That's probably the way I'd go if I were saving salary. Freddie Swain probably not going to do a whole lot for me. Maybe he'd be like the alternative to Everett right there, or Swain right there. But like, I think that, to me, we do still know where the ball is going, which is, to me, is at least kind of reassuring.
Yeah, and that's always fun when we can get those kind of target scenarios where we know where the ball is going. That's always fun for DFS and where we want to target. I would lean Metcalf. I see that Mike Gibson in the chat joining us again on Facebook was asking about, you don't usually see 2 of the studs go off for Seattle. And I do think that that's interesting because that was kind of going away when it was Russell Wilson to start this year. Both of these guys were looking very explosive. But yeah, with Geno, I just don't think the volume is there enough to make one of these guys go. But it was surprising to me that Tyler Lockett has been seeing more targets the past couple of weeks. It just hasn't come to fruition for him. It has been Metcalf, who has been the explosive guy. You love that Metcalf is pretty much this dude's a lock to get 50 yards receiving. I feel like it's just crazy. Like, I forget, in the past 2 years, like 11 out of 16 games, he's had over 60 yards or something like that receiving. So he's very safe bet. I love getting DK Metcalf props today, and I love getting him at the 13.5 salary at what we have him on FanDuel in the single game lineups.
Yeah, I think it depends on how you think Seattle plays things. If you think they keep the kid gloves on Geno, then that would push us towards Lockett, because Lockett is the guy who's going to get the quicker targets. But like, I don't know. Like they did kind of do that last week, but now it's an additional week of practice for Geno Smith. They're back at home. I feel like there is a world in which they decided, let him open things up a bit more this week, especially given again what you said about that Saints ground game. So I think I'd lean Metcalf despite the salary discrepancy between the two. I'm not sure how much salary will matter for tonight for me, given that there are some guys in the 6,000, 5,000, 7,000 range I like. So I would agree,
Right.
even with the salary difference being what it is, I would still go Metcalf personally over Lockett as well.
Yeah, I just think, and of course, this will be the Lockett game, right? I'm looking at some home leagues where I got Lockett in, needing a miracle, and maybe he does have that big explosive game. So I do like getting exposure to Lockett in tournaments on teams where I'm not getting to Metcalf if the salary works out in and of itself, or you want to play Geno with one of these guys. I think that there does have some merit to that on the Seattle side. Guys, thank you for joining in here to the FanDuel Monday Night Football preview show that we are doing here on the FanDuel channel. If you guys are watching on YouTube, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. We appreciate that thumbs up. We appreciate that. Even if it's a thumbs down, just interacting with the show, I guess would be lovely. So we appreciate all the interaction. Andrew Carlson, he brings up a point about Adam Troutman tonight and asking about his snap count percentage. I do think the Saints passing side is interesting, Jim. If we can just divulge on that for a minute here. We got Traquan Smith, I think, could possibly be active today.
Yeah.
But Deontay Harris is on IR. Chris Hogan, I think, has since retired.
Yeah.
But he's still on the slate as well, too. And we don't have Michael Thomas back. So we're basically looking at Marquez Callaway. You got Traquan, and then you got the tight ends there, and Juwan Johnson and Adam Troutman. And Adam Troutman only being at 5'5" is a little bit interesting. Also injured on the other side. We got Tony Jones on IR, and we got Taysom Hill going to miss. So I think we do have a situation here in New Orleans where we can get some concentrated pieces. Like, I don't know. I mean, Jameis Winston is 16.5, the highest priced player. So I think in tournaments, he's very interesting here when you think about what you can get out of him if you pair him with the right piece.
Can I have a proposition?
With Alvin Kamara.
I got a proposition for you. A question.
Okay.
Scale of 1 to 10. How stupid would it be of me to be super high on Kenny Thrills for tonight? It's not Kenny Stills. It's Kenny Thrills. He's back.
Yes.
There is risk there with Traquan likely being activated, like you said. I would assume that he will be at some point today. So I don't know what Stills, again, Thrills. Sorry. To Kenny Thrills. I don't know what his snap rate will be. But like he ran a lot of routes back in week number 5. Now, like you said, Deontay Harris is banged up. He had a touchdown call back by a penalty a couple weeks ago. It was a situation where Jameis threw Kenny Thrills a deep ball, caught a touchdown, got called back by a penalty. They brought Taysom in. Taysom threw a pick the next play because of course he did. And I kind of think that Kenny still has juice. So am I dumb to use Kenny Stills tonight, given we have no idea what his role will look like if we assume Traquan Smith will play?
I love that call. You know me, I'm always looking for the contrarian spots in places where people aren't going to be going. And that is very intriguing with just all the guys who are banged up. And this guy has, I don't want to say home run potential, so to speak, but I mean, he's a very explosive guy out there. We do have to think about, Traquan Smith coming back. I think people remember how he kind of ended 2020 on a high note there and be excited to play him, but you're getting such a discount there off of Kenny Stills. And those are the type of players, Jim, where, you talk yourselves into, getting exposure to because the field will be less likely to have them. And on a single game, they could pay off way more than they're getting credit for. So I do like getting to that. I think, the Seattle defense over the top has been able to be beat. Jamal Adams cannot cover at all. I mean, he's a liability in coverage for them. So if you get a deep pass there, which Jameis loves to to throw it deep, that could be interesting there. I might have to ride with you on Kenny Thrills.
Well, I think that part of it too is because I think that Andrew's question is correct and asked about Troutman and like what his role will be for tonight. Because like Troutman's like a logical play, ran a lot of routes last week. So like the logic behind Troutman is there, but he's the same salary as Stills, which means that Stills probably is going to go overlooked, especially given the Traquan uncertainty. So I think that Andrew, if you're looking for like the safer option, it's probably Troutman. Because I like if we're projecting out like routes and snaps, Troutman will grade out better. But like, if we're gonna roll the dice, have some fun, try to differentiate, I think that Kenny Stills actually is at least kind of interesting for me. Maybe it's not like a great process play, but I think that like there's a path to him being pretty good tonight.
Yeah, that's very intriguing. And then you're able to, like, when you're taking a player, you're looking at Adam Troutman being the same price there. I mean, if you put in Kenny Stills, you get DK Metcalf, you get Alex Collins, you get Alvin Kamara at the MVP, you're still able to play Callaway. You could play Lockett. Hell, if you wanted to go both of them and just say that
Right.
regardless of both of them popping, maybe this is a low scoring game. You have both
Right.
the running backs. Let me just get the people who are going to put up the most points. So I love that. Let's have some fun and get over to the FanDuel Sportsbook area. This is where we have a lot of
Right.
fun here when we talk about our anytime touchdown props. 4-1 for Kenny Stills to get into the end zone if you're feeling so obligated to get some exposure there. I think that's fun. I think also looking at like Alex Collins,
Yeah.
who's the lead back there, plus 220. Like, even though they struggle if they find themselves in the red zone or closer inside the 5 in that green zone area, I love that prop for him. I also will get some exposure. I see the FanDuel boost tonight. Alvin Kamara to score twice, plus 300, 3-1 odds. I also do love that as well tonight. Jim, what else are you kind of deferring to from this, or piecing together from this game? The pieces around these main guys do kind of seem thin, but I have played Gerald Everett a couple weeks on some of these isolated games here for Seattle. I do have some interest in him, where he only has a 6K price tag on the FanDuel single game slate. I also just don't know what to do with the rest of these pieces on New Orleans, which is kind of just leading me to fit in
Right.
as many main guys as I can. What else are you seeing from this game?
So with regards to the anytime touchdowns, Alex Collins, I think, was plus 240 an hour ago. So I think he's been getting some action, I believe. So if you want
Okay.
Alex Collins, and I agree, I think it's a really good price on him at plus 220. I know Penny likely to be activated, but like he didn't start practicing until this week. I would expect Collins to still get a lot of work there as well. So I think that the best anytime touchdown scorer is probably Collins. I do not mind Everett at 6-1 as well, which does translate over the DFS side of things. Everett in that first game back off the COVID list did play quite a bit. He had that huge reception. It was like a 40 yards, 30 yards, something like reception, something like that. And again, he's probably the number 3 piece in this passing game right now. So if we're looking at the Seattle side of things, ways to save salary, I think that Everett is the number 1 guy for me above Swain or Swain. I don't think that Swain's like totally out of play, but I think I prefer Everett between the two as well.
Yeah, Swain has seen, and I'm not sure what the route data is telling you, Jim, but
I'll
I
pull it
feel
up.
like watching this game, Swain has been, on the field and has somehow, some way, when they get into the red zone, I feel like this guy is getting end zone targets. And possibly that could be the way that the defense is playing them. Hey, we're not going to let
Right.
Metcalf beat us over the top. We know where Lockett is. And then Swain's just a guy who just, hey, I'm over here wide open. Can you get me the ball, Gino? Oh, no, you can't throw it out of bounds. But he's always just kind of interesting there when you're talking about a guy who could possibly put up, 7 to 8
Right.
if he finds pay dirt.
So last week, they had 37 dropbacks, and Freddie Swain ran 28 routes behind
Okay.
Lockett at 34, Metcalf at 30. Everett ran 18, but that was his first game off the COVID list, so I wouldn't worry too much about that number being low. So maybe I guess the takeaway is that, as opposed to me saying Everett's definitely above Swain, maybe they're more even between the two, and saying that, like, we can feel good about both those guys. That's a good route number for Swain, and like he's very young. Like, I was blown away by this. But Russell Clay was tweeting out like the Florida, I think it was Florida, like 2019 receiver room, and it was like Freddie Swain, it was Van Jefferson, Kadarius Toney was all there, and
Oh,
like
wow.
in my head, Freddie Swain's like 29 years old. He's like 23. He's younger than Dwayne Eskridge, who's a rookie for Seattle. So like,
Wow.
I don't know why this is like in my head that he's like 29 years old, which is not old, by the way. But like for a receiver, it feels old. But like he's actually pretty young. So I actually do think that Swain, maybe I was too low on him when I said that he was definitely below Everett.
Yeah, no, he like I said, I just feel like I watch the games and this guy is on the field. And so he was very interesting, I think, when Russell was the quarterback,
Yeah.
because you know that he's going to look across the field and he spreads it around enough. So he'll be a guy to definitely monitor. I feel like as we get Russell Wilson back from IR, which looks to be sooner rather than later. So this might be the last time that we are talking about Geno Smith at all, Jim. I mean, they had been in trade talks supposedly, but Pete Carroll said they were fine at quarterback, but they were going to keep the door open. And so we'll see what Geno could do. If we're talking about just this game in general, we got the Seattle being home dogs, I believe, by 4 points the last time I had seen it. So, very interesting. 4.5 is what it is now. Plus 180 to pull a win. This is one of those games where it is going to be just one of those weird things. I feel like the Saints are still kind of getting favored on the books just from being the name recognition, right? And Drew Brees era of Saints. But this is Jameis Winston, who can always, make you not feel good about having exposure to a team he's quarterbacking. So,
well, that's the fun thing is like neither Jameis nor Geno is boring. Like, it might be good, it might be really bad, but like they're not boring. So even in like a heavy rain situation, they've tried really hard to make Jameis boring this year by like just not throwing, which is annoying. So I kind of wish they would stop doing that. But like neither guy is boring. So it's going to be a weird game in one way, or a weird / fun game in one way or another.
Right. And yes, whether we're seeing turnovers or, some big plays happening, I do think that it does cause for some intrigue. And I'm going to miss this here, but I do think somebody in the chat was kind of asking about, oh, that was Kyle R on YouTube. Shout out to Kyle R, who's joining us here today, and was asking about the under tonight. And it's 41.5 right now. It hasn't really moved at all since the original line. I tend to, that's kind of a weird number for me, where the way that games have been going in the NFL and the way that we see kind of trends happening with over unders, I always tend to get action on lines that are under 42. Jim, how are you feeling about the line tonight?
Yeah, seeing 41.5, like I think my first inclination is check out the Saints team total. It's 23. I think that over 23, which is minus 116, is at least kind of interesting. Because I don't think I could bet the under on this game. Like 41 is a pretty low number, despite the weather concerns. But I also don't necessarily know if I want to bet the game over, because that means I'm depending on, Geno. Again, I love Geno. I want Geno to succeed, but like I don't really want to tie my money to him necessarily. So like I feel like if I want to get action on this game, I actually think that the over on the Saints team total at 23 points, which is minus 116, I think that's the best route for attacking the total in this game right now.
Love that. Yeah, I mean, if that over is going to hit, you got to think that the Saints are having somewhat to do with that as well. So, or staying in the game as well. So I do love getting action there. Shout out to Andrew, who's in the chat, asking about Winston at MVP, having to possibly get some action done with his legs. We talked about Tony Jones being put on IR. You're looking at the rushing totals from Jameis, not really looking all that great, but he has rushed over 5 times in 3 out of 4 games here. So, we could get some light action there with Jameis because of his price tag being 16.5. I don't feel like many people will play him. And then, I was going to ask you too, Jim, about the Kamara receiving line and what we could maybe depict from Kamara being a receiving back, which it hasn't been as explosive as it has been with Drew Brees, but he's still, getting somewhat of a target share. And with them having some pieces on IR, that could increase tonight.
And they did increase that in week 5. It's weird because we're in week 7. They didn't play week 6. Like, it's very hard to figure out the math of when they last played. They played in week 5, and it seemed like they realized they were making a mistake in not getting the ball to Alvin Kamara as a pass catcher often enough. And it seemed like they made a concerted effort to do that more often. So I think that I would expect more pass catching from Kamara than we've seen previously. 33.5 is kind of a big number, I guess, from a receiving perspective. So I feel like I'd be staying away from his yardage prop, but I think from a DFS perspective, wouldn't be shocked. I'm actually really surprised that Jameis's rushing prop is as high as it is, 18.5. I guess he's gone over in 3 out of 5 games, but like that feels kind of high. Yeah. Let me see number fires projections here for Jameis. I got 18.44, so it's right on the number. So I thought I was kind of leaning towards under there, but I think I'll probably stay away based on what the projections are saying.
Yeah, that's very interesting that that's coming at that number. I mean, unless he's getting, just absolutely pressured, I don't see him moving out of the pocket. I think they'll just scheme ways to get the ball out of his hands quickly instead of having him run there, being on the road there in Seattle with the 12th man rocking. Shout out to Savan, who's in the chat on YouTube saying, "What's up to you, Jim? Been a
He's a
while."
loyal
He just
baseball
wanted
player.
to
He's a DFS MLB DFS player. Savon was here like all the time back in the MLB days. So Savon, it's good to see you. I'm glad you're doing well.
There we go. Love that, Savant. Thank you so much for joining in. And before we're kind of getting to that 5 minute mark, Jim, but before we wrap up or get into our last final thoughts, I wanted to touch on a question that we got earlier from Tori Riddick on Facebook. And Tori was saying that they love FanDuel, but they can't seem to win, having trouble. They talked about, targeting players where they have red ranking. So the red offensive ranking there, where most people tend to, I feel like, Jim, most of the average players don't even tend to look at those numbers. They just look at names. But if you are looking at those numbers, you tend to kind of go where the green is and not target guys in the red. For somebody who's not having success, what would be one of your first advice points to give them that to try and make it successful to play DFS?
Yeah, so I would say, shameless plug, go to numberfire.com because projections are like, so I think projections are flawed in a lot of ways. Like there are a lot of things where in the way they're presented, they often show like the median projection, the mean projection, and like there are a lot of flaws with that. But if you're trying to just like educate yourself in daily fantasy and get like a baseline level, I think looking at projections is a great way to start that. So like looking at tonight, we see here Alvin Kamara, 19.3 projected FanDuel points, whereas Jameis is 15.7, Gino at 13.9. You don't see a lot of people within like striking distance of Alvin Kamara. And what that says is, okay, the range of outcomes for someone else to beat Kamara from an MVP perspective, it's tough to get there. Tough to see all that happening. So I think to me, check out projections, Tori. I think that can be kind of, or Troy, Tori, that can be like a good little like crutch. What would you say, Ryan? What would you say are things you can use to try to boost overall output?
Yeah, I think the contest selection and what you're playing in DFS would be big. I think that a lot of people, when you're first getting into DFS, you see the promos on TV, you hear what we're talking about, and you go, okay, where are my contests? Oh, I only want to play $5. But at the top, they're highlighting the millionaire contest, right? Or they're highlighting pools where there's hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of players. I would say to try and get yourself into some contests. There are some beginner contests as well. So if you haven't won or you're not very successful, you can still get into those beginner contests and play against lower competition, so to speak, quote unquote, not to be negative or anything like that, but it just would be more valuable to use those contests to learn and kind of get your feet wet and feel confident to play in some of these higher things once you get successful in the process.
The beginner contests are not like a bad thing. Like you should be seeking those out. Like absolutely, you should be looking for beginner contests because that just means you're playing against not like the sharps. It's one of the complaints we hear about DFS. It's like, oh, I don't want to play against pros. Like they're not in there. They get barred from those contests. So yeah, like you said, Ryan, you should definitely seek those out. Seek out those contests where you're playing against not pros and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. Not the sharps and then, getting frustrated because DFS is just, I mean, we talked about at the beginning. I mean, DFS is just one of those things. It's gambling. So you have to be okay. Yes. Game of skill. You have to be okay with losing. If you're getting a 50% or higher rate, you feel great about that. It's not going to be like that all the time. So there are going to be some losses, but definitely getting some, getting into some of those tournaments where there's not as many people, I think, or even playing cash games and double ups just to get yourself familiar with your own process, I think is great. Grim Fan has asked this question. I want to make sure that we get to him. Grim Fam, shout out to you joining us on YouTube channel, a regular. First of all, Devontae Adams, I saw you asked about that. He looks like he's in COVID protocol, which is why he is placed on IR. So there you go there. And then he's asking about a tight end tonight. I think we touched on a couple of tight ends, but I think for the New Orleans side, for me, I'd look at Adam Troutman. I think Juwan Johnson, while he could be in play because of the injuries, it feels kind of thin. And then on the other side, of course, it's going to be Will Dissly because I'm going to talk about Gerald Everett. But I do like Gerald Everett in between the 20s, and we hope that one of those end zone targets can go his way tonight. How you feeling, Jim?
I think if I had to rank them, because we're expecting more out of the Saints offense, you probably go Troutman 1 and then Everett 2 on the other side. So like, yeah, like you said, Will Disley, or maybe Colby Parkinson, who ran one route last week, is going to like
Right.
pop up like the pride of Stanford, going to come out of nowhere here to make us feel terrible about ourselves. I would say if I'm ranking them, Grim fan, I would go with Troutman 1, just due to offensive expectations, Everett 2, and then Juwan Johnson 3 over the secondary Seattle guys.
Sounds good, Jim, and excellent. And while we're getting to wrap up here, shout out to everybody who's joining us on the Monday Night Football preview show here on FanDuel. Jim, are there any other props that you like tonight before we go on the FanDuel Sportsbook?
No, I think the Alex Collins one is still my favorite. He's actually back to plus 230. So he's bouncing all over the place right now. So hopefully you didn't bet at plus 220. It's plus 230 once again. I still think that's the best one. That's under the assumption Rashad Penny is activated. Like that's kind of baked into this. I still like it despite the fact I know he'll likely be activated. Everett at 6-1 is at least interesting, but I think if I'm picking one, I'm going Collins personally.
Excellent. Yes, and I do like Kamara to score multiple times, but I think any time is still favorable. So I would definitely get on that, and then maybe get yourself some exposure to Kenny Stills, guys. Just for Jim, for the brand, do it for him. That would be great. Thank you guys so much for coming in on this Monday night here for the FanDuel Monday Night Preview Show that we are always doing here on the FanDuel channel. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. We got content all across the platform all week for you guys to enjoy your DFS lineups, to enjoy your betting props and everything like that. For Jim Sonis, at Jim Sonis on Twitter is where you can find him. I'm Ryan Williams signing off at Ryan Williams, or at Ryan Alexander _ is where you can find me on Twitter. We'll catch you next week, FanDuel fam. Until then, get that money. Peace.